I thought I would share with you that Neil Donald Walsh, who was in my congregation in San Diego, created Humanity's Team. And what you may not know about Neil is that for over a year, he was homeless. And he pitched a tent in a park. And he had like some note paper and, he said pencils. And he began talking to God. And, here I am in this situation. How could this ever have happened to me? And as he began his writings, he named them Conversations with God. And when he finished, a friend of his took him to Time Warner Publishing, and they had read Conversations with God, and they related to it very, very much. And they actually gave him a check for $1 million to start him out. And you can imagine how gobsmacked he was, because he found himself in this situation. You get kind of upset with God that we're in this situation. But as we look back on so many of our experiences, they were the best things that ever happened to us. And so Neil, he used to be a ghostwriter for many, many very popular authors. And I was actually having him help me with a project I was on. And then I, just wasn't, gelling. And I just said, why don't you write your own books, Neil? I said, you're such a marvelous writer with an amazing imagination. And he said, if you see yourself as having energy and power, working with other committed people to affect real change, then you have come to the right place. But let's be very clear at the outset, despite having the word revolution in our name, we are not supporting violence of any kind. On the contrary, what we propose is quite the opposite. Social change through spiritual awakening, producing impactful compassion. And I'm going to repeat that. I get chills. I get God bumps. On the contrary, what we propose is quite the opposite. Social change to spiritual awakening, producing impactful compassion. We are calling for the most dramatic shift in fundamental beliefs in human history. Yet this is not about starting a new religion. This is about showing in very clear terms at last that there is common ground where all religions and non-believers can come together for the benefit of all humanity. This is about changing the world as it is. The Evolution Revolution is a spiritual activist program of Humanity's Team, the global grassroots movement emerging from the Conversations with God dialogues. It is time for human beings to begin replacing their old spiritual dogma with an ethos of unity and cooperation, understanding and compassion, generosity and love. Yet this will take a change of mind and a change of heart. And courage. Oh yes, courage. The courage to reject every notion, every idea, every teaching of a God who would reject us. Our God is a God of love. Our God is the center of everything, the circumference of no thing. God is energy, a loving presence, everywhere present in the universe and within us. And when Emerson said, as within, so without, that presupposes that we go within to the secret place of the Most High. Do we pray to our Father, Mother God in secret, and we are acknowledged openly by the outward demonstrations of our lives. This is the day the Lord hath made. Let us consciously choose to rejoice and be glad in it. It is the gift from God. And what we make of this thing called life is our gift back to God. Is it a perfect world? No, it isn't. We have a lot of work to do on the planet, don't we? We know that Black lives matter. We know that the gay community matters. We know that the transgender community matters. We know that women's rights matter. We know that children's rights matter. We are this amazing energy of oneness that does move beyond color, race, creed, sexual orientation, and political affiliation. that we are one. And so we move ourselves out of the us and them mentality, the victim villain mentality that we get ourselves stuck in, and we begin to take responsibility. And I'm going to repeat this, and I'm going to put it on a plaque. I absolutely love this, that we are coming together as we are awakening and producing impactful compassion through spiritual awakening, producing impactful compassion. We are calling for the most dramatic shift in fundamental beliefs in human history. We are calling for social change through spiritual awakening. Social change through spiritual awakening. Awake thou that sleepest, Jesus said, and I will make thee whole, right? That Christ consciousness is within each of us, and that we call upon it. Decree a thing, it is established unto us, right? And that when Lord Buddha said that humanity is the result of all that they have thought, and that to have a heart of compassion, this was Lord Buddha. This was the teachings of Buddha. It was about compassion. Compassion for the human condition. And the human condition shows up in so many, many ways, doesn't it? And of course, the holy I am presence, that when Moses looked at the burning bush and said, who are you? What are you? The voice of I am answered, cast off your shoes, for where you stand is holy ground. In other words, there is nothing and no thing that comes between us and our spiritual knowingness. So on this day where we look at the evolution revolution, we are evolving our own consciousness, aren't we? And as we evolve our own consciousness, others come within our energy field, and they too are healed and uplifted in our presence. I was reading a magazine, and there was a feature about Matthew McConaughey, who is an Oscar-winning actor and quite an interesting character. And they were talking about his life and his acting and all that he was involved in. And I loved that he said this. He said to his kids, he said, after George Floyd died, we sat down with our kids, 3 children, the ages of 8, 11, and 12. And we mainly sat down with the 2 eldest. And we shared with them about the race problem historically, and about how unfair that was to someone because of the color of their skin. My wife Camilla is Brazilian. My kids didn't understand when the color of the skin, what it had to do with anything, because that was not in their context of reality. I want my kids to be aware. I want them to be conscientious and understand the world we live in, and that there are certain expectations, rules, and regulations. But the key is be an original thinker too. And he talks about outlaw logic is the individualism of my family thinking. And when we look at, yes, we have a lot of work to do on the planet, don't we? But to have a parent sit their kids down and say, yes, this occurred, and it's not fair, and we know that nothing is fair, that everything is by right of consciousness, that we have a lot of work to do on the planet. However, we live in a country that allows us to create grassroots coalitions that bring forth change in our world. And so as I look as being a minister for 46 years in June, 20 of it here, right here in Palm Springs, I recognize that yes, there is a lot of work to do on the planet, but we do what we can where we are with the tools that we have. And the minute we take ourselves out of victim, villain, us and them consciousness, we begin to take responsibility and create spiritual awareness within a social consciousness, that there is liberty for all, equality for all, We are all in this thing called life together. And it's not the big things. We rise to the occasion of the big things, don't we? It's the little everyday things. The willingness to transform the routines of work into celebrations of life and love. Brother Lawrence in the 5th century was working in the scullery, he was washing dishes. He looked out at the snow and the trees and the energy, and he had a flash-like moment of illumination, and he got it. All is one. How many of us have had those flash-like moments of illumination where we really got it? And we were touched so deeply that we knew we would never, ever be the same again. I've been around a long time. I've received about every award and honor one can in a lifetime, 3 Lifetime Achievement Awards from 3 different administrations, presidential administrations from the White House, and, goes on and on. But the one that I value the most was the Palm Springs Human Rights Award, because I have taken a stand in our oneness beyond color, race, creed, sexual orientation, and political affiliation. And it is not always, we don't always operate from the highest frequency. And when Tesla said, if you want to know the secrets of life, you think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency, which takes it out of the realm of personality. He said, she said, victim mentality, victim, villain, all of that. It takes it out of that context and places it in principle, that we're not always going to be operating and vibrating at the same frequency. It's not bad or good. It just is. It just is. And that we live our everyday. And as we live our everyday, to have the willingness to open the space to allow God to do what God does best by means of each and every one of us who heard the call and answered. Before they call, I will answer, and while they're yet speaking, I will hear. This is our higher power. And while they're yet speaking, I will hear. And so that disconnected feeling that we sense at times, and the sadness where we tap in to this planetary energy of sadness and what's going on, that when I do that, it's a trigger for me to go within and to focus on the healing of our planet, beginning with myself. And I have presented all over the world on world peace, and let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. With God as our source, united on our way, let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. And as we walk hand in hand with one another, the energy of the universe bubbles up and supports us in this compassion, this compassionate action. Many, many years ago, my late husband and I moved next door to his mother, and I lived next door to my mother-in-law. And she did not look kindly on me, and she would, go into her little victim mentality that I'd stolen her right arm, and I'd stolen her strength, and all of this. And she was such a victim that, her firstborn was so conscientious and so responsible to you. Suddenly, I took him away, and she saw me as this person that stole her son. And we actually moved next door to her, which was like the worst thing in the world for me. And she used to, say very unkind things. And I was not as evolved in those days. And so I would react. And, she would say something, I would react, and she'd say something. And then she'd, say she got my Irish and Indian up, and I don't have to put up with her sass. And we had found the Church of Religious Science in La Crescenta. And my minister, the Reverend Dr. Guy Lorraine, who was a marvelous, marvelous teacher and minister, I made an appointment with him because it was getting really very oppressive living next door to her. And I sat down and I began the litany of all the things that she said and how unkind she was, and that, I had to endure this. And so I became the victim. And he listened very intently, and he was like actively listening, and he was nodding his head and saying, yes, yes. And I said, so what should I do? And he said, Sharron, you have the awareness. You make the adjustment. Well, I was horrified at such an insensitive response. I couldn't believe it after all I'd been through. I have the awareness. I make the adjustment. When she initiates all this unkindness, and she was vitriolic, so I left there not very happy. And I shared with my husband, Neil, I'm never going back to that church. He was very insensitive. And Neil, he was a saint. He really was. Not that because he's transitioned, but he was amazing. He was my rock. And he said, well, you just have to do what you feel guided to do. And so as the week went on, we would see her. And I thought, well, I'm just going to if I really do have the awareness, I've taken all these classes. I've had this counseling. I've taken these expos. I've done all this work on myself. But you know what? I had not embodied it. I had not made the longest journey on the planet, the 18-inch journey from the head to the heart. I had not embodied it. It's done unto us as we believe in our hearts. For where our heart is, there our treasure will be also. And so we saw her. She threw out, her little jibes and little hostilities. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And then she said something else, and I just said, And she said something else, and I said, oh, interesting. And she took Neil aside and said, is Sharron feeling all right? And he said, yeah, she's fine. She's absolutely fine. She didn't know that she was my project. That if I was really in this way of life, taking all the classes, the workshops, expos, you name it, every training, actualizations, I took it. And to embody this in the Buddhist way is non-attachment. And if we are not attached to the energy coming in, as Jesus said, agree with thine adversary quickly, right? As we agree with our adversary quickly, as we turn the other cheek away from negativity, it cannot touch us. And so I created a formula, and I called it, let the ball bounce. And when I was in her energy and she'd throw out a little jibe, I would just let the ball bounce. I would not pick it up and throw it back, because we had quite a game going on for a few years. She'd throw it, I'd throw it back. She'd throw it, I'd throw it back. She'd throw it, I'd throw it back. And when I learned, I have the awareness, I make the adjustment. Profound. And it was so wonderful to be able to share it with Dr. Lorraine, that what I learned. And he said, I knew you had it within you. You wouldn't have taken all the classes, throughout your pregnancy and given so much to our center if you didn't have it within you. See, we want to grow, but we don't want to change. And it's like, we were talking about being impeccable with our word. And that impeccability of our word is allowing only those things out that forward and advance humanity as a whole, right? Decree a thing, and it is established unto thee. That which we utter becomes the outer. And the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart are accepted and received. O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. We are redeemed every moment of our lives as we take responsibility and realize that social change equals spiritual awakening to open hearts of compassion. That this revolution is within us to grow, to unfold, to be all that we can be, so that we can be of service to ourselves, others, and ultimately the planet as a whole. This is how it works. And I loved that Matthew McConaughey sat his kids down and said, yes, there is injustice in the world. And it's unfair because of a color of a person's skin. But that was not even in his kids' context, where maybe one of us would say, oh, I have a friend coming, and, perhaps, they're Asian or they're black or whatever, and throw that in. I dropped that long ago. because we are all one beyond color, race, creed, sexual orientation, and political affiliation. We are all one. Jesus said, this commandment I give thee, that ye love one another as I have loved ye. Love thy neighbor as thyself, which presupposes that we love ourselves. And everyone and anyone who comes within our energy field feels that love and is uplifted in the energy. We're all on the path. We're all growing. I may have been in the ministry 46 years and in this way of life over 55 years. However, we all have feet of clay. We're all growing. We're all unfolding. And hopefully we have a certain sense of mastery from incorporating and embodying the principles that set us free to be who and what we are. Yes, it's an evolution revolution. And it begins with me and it begins with you. And that makes all the difference because we are on the path and we are all going somewhere. And do you know where it is? Higher yet. Where is it? Higher yet. Where is it? Higher yet. For I am in a high place and I will not come down. None of these outer things move me. I am in a high place and I will not come down. So I say to you, namaste. The God in me salutes the God in you. And the God in you salutes the God in me. And if I'm in that place in me and you are in that place in you, there truly is only one of us. Namaste. I say shalom, the peace that passes all understanding. And God bless us, every single one. And so it is.